Hey everybody, welcome back. I am bored. COVID made me bored, and today at the table, I am taking a look at Gears of War, the card game. This is a two-player 1v1 by Steamforged Games, based on the very popular Gears of War video game, I guess, series, comic book series. I don't know if there's a comic book. Yeah, there is a comic book, and I love Gears of War. There's definitely two franchises that I'm definitely great in terms of, I think that's great, is Gears of War and Halo. And I love the back in the day playing on the Xbox 360. I just loved the franchise. I loved when I first played Gears of War, the very first game. It had a great story, a little bit spooky, but it was great, and I loved it. And I subsequently, with the Xbox 360, I bought all the other sequels, and I enjoyed every one of them. I enjoyed the Horde mode. I enjoyed the multiplayer. I enjoyed the graphics and just the texture mapping that they had in the environments. It was just really immersive. And I have Gears of War, the board game, which is great, and that was from, produced many years ago, out of print. But I love that game. It's one of my go-to dungeon crawlers that mimics the gameplay, I think, just so well. And when I heard that Steamforged Games was coming out with a card-based version of Gears of War, I thought, oh, that's great. Now, at the time of the announcement, there was very little information. Very little information in terms of what the gameplay was like, what was going to be about. Is this just another IP cash grab for Steamforged Games? Because Steamforged Games is, excuse me, very well known for turning popular video game IPs into board games. And I think one of the other ones I have is the Devil May Cry, which I feel, while I never played Devil May Cry when I was growing up on the PlayStation, um, I did watch some gameplay videos, and I did see that the concept of the game translated very well into the board game that they created, and creating the combos and linking up your I forget what it's called, your style points. I thought was very interesting. Very interesting. It was a very long game, and it doesn't really come to the table that much. But the actual game itself, I think, was quite well done. Uh, the other game that I've recently acquired is the Resident Evil 3 board game, also by Steamforged Games. I haven't had a chance to play it yet at the time of this video, but I do have it, and I'm very excited to get it on the table because I also enjoyed the Resident Evil board game. So I thought, it's interesting. Card game. Not much out there. They didn't even release the rule book. There was maybe one or two videos of somewhat the gameplay. It's a head-to-head. One person is representing the cog, and the other person is representing the locust. And I thought that I'd be really interested to see how they convert the game into a card base, and I had no idea what it was going to be like. So, in any case, when this was released retail, I think you could pre-order through Steamforged Games website, but I didn't. I wanted to see some reviews first, and once it was released, I did watch a couple gameplays and reviews, and I was meh on it. I wasn't sure if it's something that I really wanted. I wasn't sure if I wanted to add to my collection. But obviously, you see it right now. I'm doing a video on it, and I did post a quick intro that I had gotten this game. And I thought that I might as well give it a try. I had this on my Amazon list, and yeah, Amazon's not always the greatest place to buy board games because they can be marked up significantly. But this one was definitely marked up, almost double, and at some point it actually dropped down to exactly retail for me. And that was fine because I also was given a Amazon gift card as a present, and I thought, well, sure, I'll put that gift card towards Gears of War, the card game, so it's basically free, and I don't mind doing that. So I got it, and I've played a couple times. I've looked at a couple videos. The box size it's not it's very unassuming. It says 30 to 40 minutes, 14 and older, and obviously 2 players. There's no multiplayer. I think there's been people sort of saying it's a missed opportunity as well as a solo missed opportunity. But I think this is like any other 1v1, any other, I guess I'm going to call it, trading card game, collectible card game, you're facing someone else and hoping that you can outwit them. While this is not a trading card game or a collectible card game, you definitely have a little bit of deck building concepts in this, or deck creation, or deck. I don't want to call it deck building, deck configuring in this. So you do have a few options. It is very campaign based, but it's all cards, no dice, no tokens, no nothing. It's all just cards. And speaking of cards and the rule book is now that I think it is posted now online. The rule book is fairly straightforward. But I do have, and I'm going to get right to the chase. I'm going to have one criticism of this rule book, and I think a few other people had noted that. Right now, I went through the whole rule book. I went through and read before playing. I just read everything, and they've made the card game sort of true to its video game counterpart, which is when you launched Gears of War, at least as far as I recall, when you launched Gears of War the very first time, it walked you through it. You had sort of what do you call it? Like small breaks in between your gameplay to explain things. How to move, what cover's for, how to reload, what do you get, what's the bonus you get when you get quick reloads, something like that. At least that's how I recall it. And like any other video game, it guides you at the beginning. It guides you through so that you are slowly introduced to bits and pieces of the gameplay, and then it progressively gets harder because now you have the full knowledge of everything that you can do and how to use it and how to perform actions, and then you can carry forward. They have created this book, this rule book, in exactly that same fashion. It is guiding you through the first 7 campaign chapters. Explains every single rule. Now they give you at the very beginning, they give you the basics, the turn order, what kind of cards, how to identify them, and then later on they will start to explain more details on the gameplay mechanics, up until the point where I believe you get to chapter 7. And so you'll see here, for example, here, chapter 6, new rules. So each chapter up to chapter 7, new rules. So they're introducing pieces as you progress through the chapter. So they're assuming that when you play, you can play the very first chapter, but it's not going to give you the full experience. And then it's not until you hit chapter 7, after chapter 7, congratulations, Gear, you've made it this far. Now you can go in on alone. From this point, there are no new rules to learn. The rest is up to you. Basically, the rest is up to you to take in everything you've learned and try to outwit your opponent. So, and that's fine. I think that's interesting, and it stays true to the video game format, leading you in, giving you tidbits of information, and each chapter up to chapter 7 then introduces those concepts. Fine. What I don't like then is, let's say I played through the first 7 chapters. Great, that's great. I go back, maybe leave it for a couple weeks. I go back, so I want to go and play this again. And sometimes I want to just have a quick reference. There's no quick reference. This is what they have. This is your overall overview, which is in the first 2, before the first campaign chapter. And there's no rule summary, no quick, easy way to find a page that says, here's all the keywords, all the keywords, except for maybe your icons. Sure, that's great. But there's no keywords to just quickly go to. So if I want to find out, what does offensive mean? I got to find out which chapter did I learn the keyword offensive, or tactic, or tough. I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that's a huge misstep with this rulebook, is that there wasn't a 1-page or 2-pager of, maybe right here. Congratulations, Gear. You've made it this far. This page, here's everything all in one summary, so that the next time you want to start this up again and you want to just jump into a campaign or one of the chapters, you already know and you can get going right off the bat. So I think that's kind of frustrating, and I think having this, while it is a rule book, yes, it brings you through. It doesn't satisfy, for me, the rule book that I'm used to with a lot of board games, where there's a 1-page summary, a quick overview reference, and keywords. I think that'd be really helpful, would be really helpful. And considering this is not a huge, it doesn't take up a lot of table space, it's just cards. they could easily have put it an extra 1 or 2 pages in here. And so I've had to summarize the turn order, all the keywords and layout based on into a Word doc, and I'm just going to print it out and have a small copy, laminate it, and have it in the box, so that if I ever wait for a couple weeks before or not a couple weeks, it's on the shelf for a few months, I come back to it, I'm not going to get lost because of it. So I feel that was sort of a big misstep right there. So getting to the component part, there's a variety of cards, and again, they introduced the different card types during the different chapters you go through. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to try to encompass all the various cards that you're going to get. And this is basically the same for both the cog and the locust. So I'm just going to focus on the cogs. So you're going to have a couple cards, a variety of card types. And the first one I'm going to go with is, let's go with, well, you know what? Let's go with the way the area is set up. So the way the gameplay area is set up is you're going to have several, just like any other sort of head-to-head TCG or CCG card game, you're going to have your play area, and you're going to have sort of your draw pile over here, and then you're going to have your discard pile on this side. Okay, and you're going to have, I think it's, I forgot how many cards are in here, but they're all these cards. If you look at it at the bottom, it says Chapter Core. And then, depending on which chapter you're in, you may need to pull out certain chapter cards to supplement your deck. But you will always have chapter core cards in your player's deck. And in this game, your losing condition basically is to pummel your opponent to the point where they have no cards left in their deck to draw from. The moment this goes empty, that's it. You've lost. And so this is the one area. Then on the side over here, you're going to have what's called the command area. Now, they don't explain command area until later on in the chapters. So again, I feel like that's a missed opportunity. Just have one-page summary, just so that even when I'm doing a video, I can at least reference it so that I know. I might be missing something. And feel free to comment below and let me know if I do miss a step. So this is where you're going to have command cards. Command cards are sort of your ongoing effect, a character that has an ongoing effect who never enters battle. So for example, here I've got Dom, and you'll see by this symbol, it has a symbol here. This symbol represents he is a command card, and he will have some kind of ongoing effect. At the start of your turn, you may draw a card, and he'll be right here. And sorry, on the top side, you'll see this sort of number. This is called the, I guess, the initiative number. The higher the number will dictate who will go first. So I think that was sort of not very clear when I first read it, which was who starts the game, because the rule book starts with sort of an example scenario, which is, I think, the prelude scenario, or even maybe not even that. It was just going through the game turn order. So this represents initiative order. So depending on the chapter scenario, and depending who is in your command area, you could go first, or you might be going second. So we'll put that here. So we've got that. There's another type of command card, which is a command unit. Okay, so this is an example of a command unit, and this is Sergeant Phoenix. And he would also, you only ever, I think as far as I can tell, you only ever have one card in the command area. But I could be wrong. I have only gone up to Chapter 7 at this point, so I'm just trying to assume and extrapolate based on what the first 7 chapters have offered me. And it's a little different. He can actually go into battle. So whereas this command card is not a command unit, it's just a command card, he always stays ongoing effect. But Sergeant Phoenix can be a command card that is in your command area that can enter play. And I'll show the different areas in a second. And you'll see that as a regular unit, he has initiative, the symbol to say that he's a command unit, because there are other cards that are called units, and I should start up with that first. And he has his specific values for attack, defense, and any special abilities. Now, here's an example where he has keywords: tough, offensive. In here, it'd be nice, tough, offensive, or anything else. That's great. You showed me the symbols. That's command unit, but nothing else. Nothing else to help me out. So I'd have to sort of fumble through the or fumble through the rule book till I find the right chapter where it explains what tough is and also explains what offensive is. Because as far as I'm concerned, these two did not show up in the same chapter during the rule book. So that's another example where you can have a potential card in there that is a command unit. And command unit is basically an augmentation of a unit card. A unit card is what most of your cards will be. These are your troops in the cog world, and obviously the locust would have their, I guess, locust horde. So you're going to see that has a name or a title. It has the symbol. This symbol represents it is a unit, so it's deployable, which means that you can put it into the battlefield. You're going to see these numbers on the left hand corner, which represents the, I guess, cost value in order to play this card. And I find that's actually something very interesting in terms of hand management. This is based on the number of cards in your hand, including this card, in order to play this card. So for example, I think what this guy's name, his name was, I forgot. In order to deploy the lieutenant, you need to have 5 cards in your hand, including him, and then you can deploy him. Or if you had 8 cards, you can also do that. So depending on the card, you'll have a variety. It could be any number between 1 to, I think the highest I saw was 8 or 9. And then you can deploy it. And if there might be a deploy effect that can take place the moment you deploy your unit. And you'll see he has, again, here attack and defense values. And you'll see that here he actually came from the chapter reinforcement 3. So there's certain parts where you get an opportunity during the course of the campaign to augment your deck with certain cards, and you get to choose. And I'll show that in one of the chapters. So this is considered a unit. Then you've got reaction cards. That's denoted by this symbol. It has an effect, and usually the moment you don't sort of play it onto the table, you sort of play it and then discard it. And you have the card or the cost value in order to do this. So in order for me to commit or do the airstrike, I need to have 2 or 7 cards in my hand at the time that I decide to use this. So that's a reaction card that would go into the discard pile. So there you go. So in terms of continuing your play area, you're going to have what's called the reserve area. Your reserve area is where you typically would deploy your troops or your units, and they would all go here. At the start of the game, you'll have an opportunity, depending on the scenario, which I'm going to show the scenario card, there's a certain amount of setup that's required. So each chapter will have a scenario. So I'm going to give this an example, which is trial by fire. You'll see they've got these 2 symbols, which I'm not sure why they're here. It doesn't really tell me anything other than the fact that when it comes to cover, there'll be hidden cover and unhidden cover. But I'll get to cover in just a minute. And I think that's the one thing that kind of, as of right now, there's nothing specifically unique to the theme of Gears of War. But when it comes to cover, that was one of the things, for example, the board game, that made a difference. It was unique and made the game experience more similar to the video game. So here you're going to have a setup. You'll have a condition. So for example, as you move and progress through the chapter, depending on the outcome of the previous match, you would follow these instructions. So for example, if the cog player claimed chapter 1, if they won chapter 1, they would use cell block Marcus. Otherwise, instead, they would use hardened Marcus. So that's sort of an incentive for you to obviously try to win. Obviously, you want to win your games, but I find that they try to balance it. So if the last player won, sometimes they get that winner might get a slight holdback or a slight bonus, and then the locust, or in this case the locust, they might get a bonus if they lost the first round. And what's interesting here too is when you're playing matches, it's the best of 3, and in order to determine how you move on to the next chapter. And that could sort of extend your game time quite long. I mean, you could just do a 1-round game and then, winner take all. But the rule book recommends that you do a best of 3. So you're going to see that it's going to outline the various types of cover that you're going to have in the field. On the back side, it'll explain to you which cards you need. So you're going to have command cards that are going to be in the command. So for both sides, the locust and the cog, as well as any additional cards pertaining to that chapter that you would fetch out and include and shuffle into your respective decks. So you'll have the scenario card sort of out off to the side, and then you're going to lay out the middle field, which will be your cover. And there's various types of cover. You'll see here that it has a red side and a blue side, and this is sort of respective of how you're positioned on the table. My opponent would be on this side, the cogs are on this side. So you'd place out all the specific and required cover cards. Now, some of them are might be in the scenario setup deemed as hidden, in which case you would hide or flip it over so you don't know exactly. You shuffle it, hide it, and put it out randomly, and you don't know exactly what cover you're going to land into if you decide to use cover. But for just sort of the setup example, you would have your cover out in this area. So you have your reserve, your draw, your discard, your command, cover or terrain, scenario, and then on the other side, the locus would have the exact same setup. And this is basically the layout of the game. In the first few reads of the rulebook, it doesn't go through all this because it hasn't gotten to that part yet. So again, it's leading you into how the play area will progress as you get through the rulebook. Sometimes I just lay it out. Just tell me everything I need to know. Don't spoon feed me. Just give it all to me all in one shot, and that way I know exactly what to expect. So when it comes to your turn, and you would have, I think, a starting hand of 5 cards. You'd have a starting hand of 5 cards, and you take a look at your cards, and you'll see that in this situation, I've got mostly units. These are mostly units that I've got, and you'll see that I have varying values in order for me to deploy or play these cards on my turn. So obviously with this fresh recruit, it says any, so I can play any with any card count. You'll see with the private, I can only play it with 4, 5, or 6. So in this situation, I have 5 cards in my hand, so I'd be able to play this one on my turn. 4, 6, and 7 for the forward vanguard means I can't until I discard, or I have 4 cards in my hand, or 6 or 7. The elite armadillo would require 8 cards in my hand, and then heavy infantry 1, 2, and 3. So there's my starting hand, and what will be happening on my turn is I'm going to take one action, and I have 3 action choices to choose from. This is considered the first deployment phase on your turn. This is where you're sort of gonna set up your troops and start sort of maybe strategically placing them or getting them set up depending on what your values that you have and the cards that you have in your hand. So you can then choose to deploy one of your troops or play a reaction card or a tactic card. I think I missed the tactic card. This was a tactic card. Sorry. So this one is a tactic card. I don't know if I called it a reaction card or a tactic card. No, sorry. You know what? My mistake. This is a tactic card, and there is another one called a reaction card, and it has an exclamation. And I don't know. You know what? Let me see. I should have it right here. There we go. Sorry, guys. Right there. So this one is a tactic card that you can also play on your hand, and you have a reaction card. You can, again, it would also have a cost. Reaction cards typically, as far as I can tell, are typically in response to when you are being attacked, typically. So we'll keep that off to the side here, and your tactic card. So on my turn, I can deploy a card by ensuring that I have a card in my hand in which I can pay the cost. I'm going to use that very loosely onto my reserve. So I'm going to remove, I forgot his name, him. Okay. So in this situation, I could play the private because I have 5 cards in my hand. So I can play the private. And you'll see he has a special text. While this unit is in cover, it gains +1 attack. So I could do that. I could play the card into my reserve. They always go into your reserve. Another action that I could take is I can draw a card from my draw pile. And another third action I could take is I could discard a card from my hand. Now, why would I do that? Sometimes, for example, I really want to play this forward vanguard, but I have too many cards in my hand. So I could discard one, setting me up for the next deployment phase because that's my action. I've discarded, and now I'm ready to go for the next deployment phase, which I can then play that card. So those are my 3 actions: deploying a card, on my turn, draw a card, and discard a card, and that would be on my turn during the very first deployment round. Now, as the very first round of a game, the first player to go only gets one deployment. After that, you will have an opportunity for a second deployment, and I'll explain that. I guess the round structure is the active player would have the first deployment, they would have a combat phase, and then they would have a second deployment. But on the very first turn, you only get one deployment. I think that was a little sort of hidden away into the campaign rules, but eventually it surfaced and I saw it. So I'm going to play the private. I'm going to put him in my reserve. So that action is done. So the next thing I would do is I would move into the combat phase. This is completely optional. You do not have to do anything if you choose not to, but most of the time you probably will. And you have a couple options. So it all depends on what the layout is. I'm just going to move these off to the side here. It all depends on the layout of the situation. So right now I have the option. Anybody in my reserve, I can, as an action in my combat phase, I can move them into cover. So that would be provided that the cover is not occupied. So if I had a locust person in cover, we'll put them this way, okay? Can you see that? Let me just move this down a little bit. There we go. I can take my troop or my unit from my reserve, and I can move them into cover. Now, what happens if there's someone already in cover? Well, that would be attacking into cover. That would be my action. I would be attacking him while he's in cover. So before I get into that, let's just move this one out of the way. So one of my options is, as long as one of the cover is empty, I can move him in. And you'll notice that on this one, on this particular cover, I gain a bonus. While I'm in this cover, I gain this bonus of a +1 attack and +1 defense to my unit. Likewise, if there was a locust on the other side of this card, they would gain 1 and 1 as well. Now, for some cover cards, the text is different depending on which side you're on. Sorry, depending on which team you're on. So the locust text might be different than the cog text on this cover. So by moving into cover, that's my action. I can't do anything else. If I had other troops or units in my, say for example here, I could also move him into cover, provided that it's not already occupied. If it is occupied, then I go into a combat phase with whoever's on the other side of that. So what's going to happen here is that's one of my actions. Now let's just say I started my turn and I already had someone in cover. The way I guess, like I said, your health, your player's health is basically your deck of cards. When you're attacking the player, not specifically the troops of the opponent. So in this case, the locust. So and then you'll whittle their deck down to the point where they have nothing left, and you've declared victory. So if I'm in this position here, in cover, I can then do a direct attack against my opponent, and they would lose cards from their draw deck. Now, there's a couple exceptions here. When I'm in the cover, right now I'm on this side, which is the friendly side of the cover, and that's considered defensive. I am on the defensive side of this cover. If I were to declare an attack, so during my combat phase, I've already got someone in cover, and I say, hey, I'm going to attack. I'm going to attack my opponent. I have the option to move to the other side of the cover where I'm considered on the offense. The term or the keywords offense and defense are important as they provide you sort of a benefit as well as a hindrance depending on which side you're on. So if I move on this side and then declare an attack, and let's just say the other player, he doesn't have any units or troops in his reserve, it's a direct hit. And as a result, I get to inflict 3 wound damages or points of damage to my opponent. Now, if I was on this side, I can still attack. I say, I want to stay behind cover, but I attack my opponent. He's got no one to block. Then I would deduct 2 cards or remove 2 cards from his deck. Now, when he does that, when that happens, I have the choice to, or that my opponent has a choice to take those into his hand. He doesn't have to, but he can take them into his hand. He can discard both or he can take both, and he has to make that decision prior to discarding or flipping over those cards. So I think it'll make more sense once I do a quick playthrough. I think I'm having a little bit of trouble explaining it. And I think that's one of the things that's making it complicated, is because, again, there's no one-page rule to go through everything. It's sort of all seeded out throughout the 7 chapters. That makes it a little frustrating. So hopefully you're getting this. If not, just skip forward. So if there was a locus on the other side in the reserve, you can't see that right there. Let's say he's right there. Okay, he's not in cover. I'm going to move these down a little bit just to get some space. And let's say I declare on my turn, I have a unit that's in cover, and I say I want to attack my opponent. My opponent has a choice to say, does he want to use one of his troops to block and intercept that attack, which he can. Then they would exchange fire and resolve the attack. How does the resolve work? Well, let's just say I was in cover and I want to attack. Now, if I'm in the reserve and my opponent has in a reserve and no one's in cover, I can't attack. I can't attack my opponent. I can't even attack my opponent's units in the reserve. The only time I can attack my opponent directly is when I'm in cover. So if I start my turn in cover, I'm going to do an attack. So let's start here. I'm going to do an attack. My opponent has someone in reserve. They can choose to say, yeah, I'm going to block it. So they would sort of declare that and say, I'm going to block. So what you would do is then you would compare. You would take a look. You would compare his attack value. The attack is exchanged simultaneously. You would compare the attack value, the defense value to the opponent. And in this situation, you'll see that the spotter drone would kill the private because it meets or exceeds the defense value of the private, but the private does not cannot beat the defense of the spotter drone. So let's just say that were the case. Let's just say he's here. Okay. There's no benefit to being behind this cover. They do the attack. The drone does the block, and the private would be killed, goes into the discard pile, and the spotter drone in the reserve is then damaged, not killed, so he is tapped, I guess. I'm going to use the word tap. Okay. So in future turns, or my next, if I had another unit in cover, and I were to issue the next attack, and you're resolving one attack at a time, the spotter drone can no longer defend. If the locust opponent had another unit that was undamaged, unexhausted, or untapped, or whatever you want to call it, then they can then put that forward to do the block. Okay. So let's just say he didn't have anyone. So I've got my private in cover. I declare an attack on my opponent. He's got no one. So then automatically my opponent receives 2 damage. Now, it's regardless of my attack value. So even if my attack value is 10, the maximum in this situation, I can, in terms of damage to my opponent, would be 2. So he would draw or discard 2 cards from his deck. But if I choose to say, hey, before I attack, I'm going to move my private into the offensive position of that cover, and there's no one blocking me. It's a successful attack, direct attack to my opponent. He would then get 3 damage, and that's typically the maximum, unless you have a card effect that can increase it. So that's one of the differences. Now you're probably thinking, well, then why not always just be on the offense? Well, while I'm here, if there was on the locust turn, if there was a locust here, he could attack me. He could attack me by attacking into cover, and he would get a bonus because I'm not being protected anymore. It kind of falls in line with sort of the theme of the game. When you're on one side of the cover, you have protection while you're on, and possibly a bonus. While you're on the other side of the cover, on the enemy side, you're sort of exposed. It's not really covering you anymore. So the attacker, or the locust here, because you're on his side, he would get a +1 attack damage to you when he attacks. So you'd have to sort of weigh the pros and cons of getting that extra damage to the opponent if you're successful, and risking exposure that your unit is on the enemy side of cover. So this is the friendly side of cover. This is the enemy side of cover. Okay, so having said that, let's just say I had a on my turn. I had my unit in reserve. There was already a locust in cover on the other side. One of my actions is I can attack an enemy in cover. Now, I feel this was sort of a rule that I don't know if it's hidden or just maybe wasn't clear. The way I imagine it is your option to attack someone in cover is you're running up. You're running up towards the cover and you're attacking. Boom, 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 boom. You're shooting in, hoping to kill them. Now, that's one of your actions that you can do if if you have a unit in reserve. So you can attack into cover. So attack while you're going into cover. This was not very clear to me at the beginning. So what will happen is, let's just say I want a better example. Let's say it's I don't know, heavy infantry. Okay. So let's say the elite armadillo, which again, this doesn't make any sense to me because a vehicle would not attack into cover, but I'll get to that later. So he's got 5 attack, 5 defense, and he's going to, on my turn, from my reserve, I'm going to attack into cover. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and attack into cover. As I'm going into cover, we'll exchange the values, attack and defense simultaneously, and then resolve. So in this situation, the elite armadillo has 5 attack, 5 defense. The spotter drone is 3 attack, 3 defense. It's dead, clearly dead. So he would be killed, discarded, and the elite armadillo would then occupy that cover. Now, when I first read the rule book, I thought if I had a troop or a unit down here attacking into cover, I'm just attacking. I'm just shooting into cover. When I play the game, I'm not running into cover shooting the guy. Sometimes I'm just trying to peg him behind cover when he sticks his head out from a distance. Once I kill him, then I move into cover. So I guess maybe at the end of the day, it is very similar. So at first I didn't understand that, so I was playing it wrong. So I'm moving into cover, shooting into cover, boom, 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 boom. I kill him, and then that's it. Now, if I had another this heavy infantry unit who had 3 and 3, I'm attacking into cover, and we're going to kill each other because our exchange of fire and defense is equal. So we're just going to kill each other. Now, during an attack, I forgot to mention this, is you have the option, starting with the defender, is to deploy a reaction. And we're going to go back to the reaction here. So if this card has the reaction, and you'll see that the reaction here is a friendly unit gains +2 attack, +2 shield, or +2 defense, and then you may draw a card. Now the Locust will have something similar, a little bit different. I think theirs is like, add +2 and 2, and discard a card, or draw a card. There'll be some kind of effect. So let's just say my heavy infantry is sitting down here. He wants to attack. He's going to attack into cover towards the spotter drone. But clearly, I'm not gonna. Not only am I gonna kill him, I'm also gonna die. So at this point, I declare the attack. The defender has the opportunity, if he wants to play a reaction card, and as long as he can pay the cost. Now, I think for some of these reactions, I think it's mostly any when you're sort of bumping up stats. But in this situation, the Locust defender would have that option. He could play a card, and then I, as the attacker, have that option. I believe that's the order of things. I think that I can declare first, or sorry, the opponent declares first, and then the attacker plays a reaction card. So let's just say he doesn't play anything. Then I play my heroism. I get 2 and 2 as I go into cover. I kill the spotter drone because I have now 5 and 5. Now, I've taken damage, but while I'm undercover, I'm not exhausted or tapped or damaged or whatever it's called. It only happens when you're in the reserve. So that's the 2 things that you can do. You can, if you start your turn and your troop or your unit is in the reserve, they can move into cover. Action done. If you have a unit that's starting in cover, then you have the option to attack the opponent directly, and you can also choose to move into enemy cover to sort of bump up your damage value. And at that point, your defender has the option to block the attack with a unit that they have in reserve if they have one. Otherwise, they have to take damage by taking two cards, at least two cards from their deck. They can either add them to their hand or put them in their discard pile. So that pretty much covers the gameplay, the area, sort of the play area, and the overall concept of deploying a card. And I actually almost forgot, deploying a card and your reserve. That was the combat phase. I'm sorry, I'm going to rewind a little bit. So once I finish my combat phase and I have no other actions to take, except for the very first turn of the game, you now go into the second deployment. So let's just say who did I have? I had the private, right, because he was 5. And I moved him into the reserve. I moved him from the reserve during combat phase. I moved him into cover. If I had any more, I can move them into cover if there's cover available. And then I enter the second deployment phase where I look at my hand and I can deploy or play a tactic card from my hand, provided that I can pay its cost. So in this situation, I can play the Ford Vanguard, which is 4 and 6. So because I have 4 cards in my hand, I can place him and he goes into the reserve, and that ends my turn. Then we flip it over to the Locust, who goes through the exact same process. They have a first deployment phase. They can put down a troop, they can play a tactic. Then they would enter combat phase if they choose to. After that combat phase is over, they would enter their second deployment phase where they can place another unit into the reserve, or they can play a tactic card. So now I think I've pretty much covered everything, and I think it'll make more sense once I go through a playthrough and sort of go through the flow of the game. I feel it goes back and forth very quickly, sort of again, very similar to the theme of the game. It's fast-paced shooting back and forth, and the real challenge to this is determining how to get into cover, because you want to position yourself, what kind of cards you're drawing, like what kind of units end up in your hand, and what kind of tactic cards you get to help you out, because sometimes you can frag someone in the cover, blow them out, and then you can move your units in. And at the same time, you're also managing the number of cards in your hand. You have to think about your next play. You have to. You can't just play as you go. You need to think 1 or 2 steps ahead so that you can manage the number of cards in your hand based on what you want to do, so that you have the right number of cards in your hand to play them. Otherwise, you won't be able to. And the very first time I played this, and mind you, I am playing against myself, so it's a little different. It's trying to make sure that, will I have the right cards in my hand for the second deployment, or even for my first deployment, my next turn, in my hand, so that I'll be ready to go. And I found that was the most challenging part. And to me, that's kind of like managing your ammo resources when you're playing Gears of War, because you have limited ammo, you have limited resources, and you need to get through. The board game is even worse. It's so challenging to manage the ammo in the board game that you end up using too many ammo when you didn't have to, and then you end up having nothing when you need them. So I like that. I like that sort of idea and how it does play into the theme. So I'll get back to that a bit more, but I'm going to set the table up for a quick me versus me to show you the game flow of Gears of War, the card game. I will see you soon. All right, I'm back. I've got my table set up for Gears of War, the card game. I've decided to go with the second chapter just as a demonstration of the game flow. I was in the middle of another campaign, so my actual Cog and Locust deck are slightly not configured the same way, but I feel like you could probably customize games. You don't have to go through the scenario. You would just basically ensure that you are going through the campaign and substituting cards where they need to be. And I forgot to mention that in the overview, which is at certain points during the game, during the campaign, you will come across what's called the reinforcement section. And reinforcement sections allow you to, I guess, customize your deck a little bit. So what will happen is it'll tell you, there's like 200 and somewhat cards in this game, but not all of them are being used. You pull certain cards for certain chapters, And at certain points during the campaign, you have the option to take out certain cards from your deck and substitute them with other cards dictated by what's outlined here in the campaign book or in the rule book. And it'll tell you, and sometimes, most of the time, it's a choice. You can choose a group of cards that you have to find from the stack of cards in the deck and then put them into your player deck, your respective player deck, Locust and Cog. So this is a little bit of flexibility and I guess replayability when it comes to choice. Sure, it's a 1v1. I think replay will always feel different because you never know what cards you're going to have and the strategies that you use to play those cards. But on top of that, you do have a bit of deck construction, very limited. I almost am very hesitant to call it deck construction because it only happens maybe 2 or 3 times during the course of the campaign. At the end of the day, you'll roughly have the same number of cards in your deck because you're taking some out and putting some in, and usually the ones that you put in are typically slightly more powerful or more beneficial to you. So I had a previous campaign running, so I do have a mix of cards in here, but that should not impact the overall game flow of how I'm demonstrating. And I'm going with Chapter 2, Trial by Fire, and you'll see that I've got the low wall, 2 low walls and a high wall for my cover. You'll see that the high wall has its benefit of +1 and 1 to the friendly unit, friendly or enemy unit. They gain the same, there's no difference. I'm playing the Cog, and I'm also playing the Locust, as usual. And you'll see here that if the Cog player claimed Chapter 1, they use Cell Block Marcus, otherwise they use Hard Marcus. So in this example, I assume that I did not claim Chapter 1, so I'm going to be using Hard Marcus. Hard Marcus is a command unit, so he can be deployed during game, and he has an initiative value of 1. That's his symbol saying that he's a command unit, and he has his attack and defense values. And it says, when this unit is in the command area and a Cog is killed, you may move this unit to the reserve. And you've got the Locust side has their command card in the command unit, which is not a character. It's actually Emergence Full, sort of an ongoing effect. And you'll see that the initiative value is 2. So in this game, in this particular game, the Locust will go first. So I'm going to draw 5 cards. That's your starting hand. So 5 cards for the Locust and 5 cards for the Cog. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because the Locust has higher initiative value, they will go first. So I'm going to take a look at my hand. I have 5 cards, it's always the starting hand, and I see that I have a couple options here. I've got 2 reaction cards, I've got 3 units, and right now I cannot play this unit because I don't meet the cost requirement, which is 1 card, 2 cards, or 7 cards in your hand, including the card that you want to deploy. But I can do Wretch Pack, which is 5. So I'm going to deploy this card. That's my action. I could not take that action. I could draw a card instead, or discard a card if I wanted to. So those are my 3 options. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play this card into my reserve. And I think you can see the reserve up here. Screen's a little tight, so I'm just going to put it a little bit higher so you don't confuse it as being in cover. And then that ends the first deployment phase. Now, for the very first term of the game, there will not be a second deployment phase for the Locust. It's just the 1 deployment. Consecutive turns after that, players will have a second deployment. So at this stage, I have a choice to move into the combat phase. In the combat phase, I have 2 options. I can move into cover, I can attack into cover, and if I'm starting in cover, I can directly attack my opponent. In this situation, the Locust does not have any cards in cover, so I will move. If I want to, I can choose to move my Wretch Pack into cover, but I'm not going to because I like his ability. While this unit is attacking into cover, it gains 3 and 3, which effectively makes it 4 and 4 for attack and defense. So I'm going to leave him in the reserve. So I'm going to leave him up there. Okay. So now Locust turn has ended. Now it goes into the Cog's turn. I'm looking at my hand. I've got 5 cards, and as you can see, except for Fresh Recruit, I do not have any other choice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play Fresh Recruit because he's a unit. Any value of cards in my hand, so that means I can deploy him. And he's got just some flavor text. There's nothing serious here because he's very weak. He's a recruit. So I'm going to play him into my reserve. That's my action. My next action now is I can choose to move into cover, which I will. So this is the combat phase. I'm going to move my Fresh Recruit into cover. He gains 1 and 1, +1 attack, +1 defense because he's in cover. And that ends the combat phase because I have nothing else I can do. So as this is the second turn in the round, I'm allowed to have a second deployment phase. So I'm going to look at my hand, and now I can play the Forward Vanguard. Before I couldn't play it because I had 5 cards in my hand, but now I can play it because I meet the requirement of 4. So I'm going to play the Vanguard, and it's going to go into my reserve. I can't attack with him. I can't move him. That ends my turn. So I'm going to put my cog cards to the side, and at the start of the turn, the emergent hull says, on your turn, you may move a Wretch Runt to the reserve. I do not have a Wretch Runt in play. If I did, I could follow that text and make that happen. So instead, I'm going to look at my hand. Now notice something different. Usually with other card games, you always like draw 1 or draw 2 cards at the beginning of your turn. In this game, there's none of that. So it took me, the first time I played, I kept on confusing my collectible card game, trading card game habits, and I kept on drawing a card, and I wasn't supposed to. Okay, so you'll see here now I have the option to play my Grenadier because I have 4 cards in hand, and he can be played with the cost of 4. On his deploy, you may discard a card. If you do, you can draw up to 2 cards. Now, I can take a look here, and I think I'm okay with this. So I'm gonna play him to my reserve as well. Okay, and now this is where I am able to do the combat phase, and I'm gonna show you what happens when I'm about to do that. So let's see. Can you see that there? I think this is a decent angle. Okay. You know what? Let me just move these guys down just a bit so there's a little bit of space. Okay. So for me, I've got go into my combat phase, and I have a couple of choices. I can move the Grenadier into a unoccupied cover. I can also attack into cover because I've got a fresh recruit on this side, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to move the Grenadier into open cover. So that's first. That's one action there that I can do during my combat phase. I still have something I can do with the Wretch Pack, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to declare that I'm attacking into cover. I'm going to attack the fresh recruit with my Wretch Pack. And when I do that, because of the Wretch Pack's ability, I gain +3 attack and +3 defense, which gives me +4 attack, +4 defense. Now, the fresh recruit is in cover. He gains +1 and 1, which means that effectively he is +3 attack, +3 defense. So I'm clearly going to win this one for the Locust. At this stage, the cog player, as the defender, has an option to play a reaction from his hand if he can. In my hand, I have no reactions. There's nothing for me to augment my my fresh recruit's stats. So unfortunately, I can't play anything. Now, let's say I could play something that added an extra 1 and 1. So now he's at 4 and 4, which is equal to the Wretch's 4 and 4. The attacker has now an opportunity to play a reaction card in which I could do this. I could do this one. A friendly unit gains 3. Now, this doesn't really benefit me because if this was a situation where the fresh recruit had 4 and 4, we would just both die. There's no advantage to playing this because I'm not protecting the Wretch Pack. But if I had a card that said a friendly unit gains +2 attack, +2 defense, that would be worthwhile. Then the Wretch Pack would actually survive. In this situation, I'm not doing anything. The fresh recruit doesn't have anything, so the Wretch Pack is coming in, attacking into cover. We exchange attack and defense simultaneously, and the fresh recruit is killed. And the Wretch Pack now occupies the cover space, which gives it +1 and 1. So that ends the combat phase. There's nothing else I can do, and that ends my combat phase. So now I move into the second deploy phase for the Locust. Now I look at my hand. I've got 2 reactions, and I have a Cantus Priest, but it requires 1, 2, or 7 cards in my hand. So I can't do anything. So now my choice is draw a card, discard a card, or deploy a card. I can't deploy. So I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to discard. I'm going to discard this card. Because what effectively that will set me up for being able to play the Cantus Priest on my next deployment phase for the Locust. Okay, so now it flips over to the cogs. Sorry, I forgot one thing. Once the fresh recruit was killed, I have the option to immediately put Hard Marcus into play. So as you can see, when this unit is in the command area, which it was, and the fresh recruit was killed, I can move this into the reserve. So I will. Let's just say at the time he was killed, I moved him to the reserve. So now it's the cog player's turn. I can draw a card, I can discard a card, or I can play a card, and I can play. I can play either the heavy infantry or a scout. I think I'm going to play heavy infantry. It's 1, 2, or 3. Ideally, I play Scout first, because when I play the Scout, I will then have 2 cards, and then I can play Heavy Infantry. So let's just take a chance here. We're going to do Heavy Infantry first. So I'm going to play him into my reserve. So he's in my reserve now. Now I have 3 units in reserve, and now I enter the combat phase. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have Hard Marcus attack into cover. He's going to go and attack the Wretch Pack into cover. So he's moving up, and we're going to exchange gunfire. So the Wretch Pack has 1 and 1, but it gains, because of this cover high wall, it gains +1 attack, +1 defense. So it has 2. Hard Marcus has 5 attack and 4, so it looks like he's going to survive. But now is the option for the Locust player to play a reaction, and he's going to play Hive Mind. So Hive Mind, a friendly unit gains +1 for each friendly unit in reserve or cover. So I'm going to play that, and there are 2 friendly units for the Locust in cover, which adds +2 attack to the Wretch Pack. So I'm going to play that one. So now it's 4 and 4 and 2 for the Wretch Pack. 4 attack, 2 defense. And for the Cog player, as the attacker, I have nothing, no reactions cards that I can play. So we're going to exchange gunfire. Clearly this one's going to die, but let's see. Did I have enough? I have 4 and 4, which is enough to defeat Hardened Marcus. So Hard Marcus is killed, along with the Wretch Pack. So the Wretch Pack is killed, Hard Marcus killed. Now, there will be some times when a card says the word tough, a command card. Or a command unit. And if it says the word tough, if it's killed, it goes back into the command area. So a good example would be in this game, the Berserker. The Berserker has, I think, a defense of 4 or 5 or whatever, and if you kill it, it doesn't get killed from the game or removed from the game. It just goes back into the command areas, and it can be redeployed. But unfortunately, Hard Marcus took a chance, and he's killed. So he's completely removed from the game. So I'm just going to remove him, and he's not going to go in discard pile. And now we continue with the Cogs combat phase, in which case I can move my heavy infantry in attacking into cover, which is attacking the Grenadier. Again, the Locust has an option to play a reaction. He doesn't have a reaction. So we're going to exchange gunfire, and the Grenadier is going to get killed because he only has 2 defense, but the heavy infantry has 3 defense, which takes all the damage from the Grenadier and does not die. And the heavy infantry's text here, when this unit moves from reserve into cover, the enemy player is dealt 1 direct damage. So the enemy player is dealt 1 direct damage, which means 1 card from the top of his draw deck. It can either go into his hand or into the discard pile. And I think it would be beneficial for me to take that card because I can deploy the Cantus Priest on 2. So I'm going to take that card. I'm going to draw. There we go. So we got the Wretch Pack. Okay, so we're going to put that there. And then I can do something with the Ford Vanguard, which I think right now I will say, oh, I forgot this one too. There's an ability here. While this unit is in the reserve, which it was, or cover, when you deploy another heavy unit, the enemy player is dealt 1 direct damage. So when I deployed the heavy infantry, I would get 1 direct damage to the player. In that case, let's just say I discarded that one. So I think I would reverse the order in which I did that, but that's okay. It was a kind of an oversight. But that's something to keep in mind as you're playing for the whichever side you're on, is to be very aware of what text that you have on the cards and how it affects. Some effects take place if the card is in the reserve. Some effects take place if the card is in cover. Some text take place depending on the position of your opponent, where they're sitting. So you have to be very mindful of that. And obviously, moving effects. If you move into cover, if you move into reserve, if you move into the offensive enemy cover, there could be effects that take place. So that's something to keep in mind that creates a little bit of complexity to the game. So the Ford Vanguard, I'm going to leave him here. So I'm not going to move him. And at the end of my turn, I can draw, discard, or play a card, or deploy a card, and I can't deploy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a card. So I got another fresh recruit. That ends my turn. So now we're going to look at the Locust turn. Emergence Hole. If there's at the end of your turn, you may move a Wretch Runt to the reserve. That's not applicable, and it's not the start either. It'll be at the end of the turn. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play my Cantus Priest, which is 2, because I have 2 cards in my hand. It goes into the reserve. Then I have the choice. Once it deploy, you may move a unit in your discard pile with an attack value of 2 or less to the reserve. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my thing. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to move this one. I'm going to actually move the Wretch Pack. I'm going to move the Wretch Pack because it has an attack value of 2 or less, and it goes directly into the reserve. So that was the Cantus Priest. It's kind of resurrecting in the game. It'd be synonymous with resurrecting the one of the fallen locust. And now I enter the combat phase, in which case I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the Cantus Priest into cover, and I'm going to move the Wretch Pack into cover and attack into cover. So it's going to exchange gunfire with the heavy infantry. The cog player, as the defender, has an opportunity to play a reaction. I do not have one. The Wretch Pack could play a reaction, doesn't need to because it gets +4 and +4, which is going to defeat the heavy infantry, and he dies. And the Wretch Pack now occupies that cover. We now have completed the combat phase for the Locust, in which case we can enter the second deploy phase for the Locust, and he's going to deploy the Wretch Pack into the reserve. End of turn. Beginning of turn for the cog player. If there are any beginning of turn effects from the command area, I would do that, but there isn't. I look at my hand. I'm going to play the Scout. So I'm going to play the Scout for because I have 3 cards, I can play him. He goes into the reserve, and I have the option to draw up to 2 cards. Now, you'll have card effects that allow you to draw more cards, and you have to be mindful in terms of remembering that this is your life as the player. The faster you burn through that, the worse it is for you. So you have to be very mindful about what are you trying to do if you need to draw more cards. Now, I think I need some more options, so I am going to do that. I'm going to draw 2 more cards. 1, 2. Okay, that's not too bad. And then I enter my combat phase, in which case I don't think I'm going to be able to do much except for I'm going to try to get this Scout to attack into cover. So he's going to attack into cover. It's 2 on 2-2 versus 1-1. And at this point, the defender, which is the Locust, could play a reaction. They can't. I could play a reaction, which I don't have one. But we exchange gunfire, and the Wretch Pack is killed. And my Scout now occupies that cover. Now, my forward Vanguard could go ahead and attack the Cantus Priest, but because I don't have anything to support him, there's no way that he would survive. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to keep the forward Vanguard here. That ends the combat phase. I move into my second deployment, in which case I'm going to deploy another forward Vanguard. Okay? So there's 2 in my reserve. And this will give me a good opportunity to show, I think, multi-blocking. Right. So that ends the cog turn. Now it goes to the Locust turn. He has no cards, no startup effects. So I'm going to choose to draw a card because that's really my only option. So I get the Vicious Wretch. And Vicious Wretch actually belongs to a previous campaign, but that's okay. I'm going to hold on to him anyways. And now I enter the combat phase, in which case I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the Wretch Pack into attacking into cover. So he's attacking into cover. He's going to attack the Scout with 4 attack, 4 defense. And as the cog defender, I can play a reaction. I don't have one, so it's going to kill the Scout. And the Wretch Pack is going to go into cover and occupy it. I'm going to have the Cantus Priest, for the sake of demonstration, attack the player. So he starts in cover, so he has the option to attack directly the player. As the cog defender, I have a choice. I can allow the attack to happen, or I can declare any units in my reserve to block that attack, and I can choose as many as I want to. So in this example, if I were to just say I only had one, I'm going to just say I only had one. So I've got the forward Vanguard. Oh, I want to block it. So I'm going to put him forward. I'm going to say he's blocking the attack. The Cantus Priest has 2 attack plus 2 defense, but he gains 1 and 1 because he's behind this cover. The forward Vanguard has 2 defense. He's clearly going to die. And let's just say I don't have a reaction card to bump up his stats, and the Locust doesn't either. So the forward Vanguard would die, and he'd be discarded. No damage to the player. If I didn't have anyone, and the Cantus Priest wanted to attack, he first has the option, if he wanted to, and he could also do it before, is to move into offensive cover. He's on the enemy side and do an attack. He'll gain +1 damage if he's successful. I could do the same thing. I could block with my forward guard, and again, he would be killed in this situation. But one of the differences is the forward guard would have an extra +1 to the Cantus Priest because he's now on the other side of the cover. So he doesn't gain that, I guess, defensive position. But the Cantus Priest still benefits from his +1, so +1 So he's 3 and 3. The forward vanguard is 3 and 2, and he attacks. Both of them would die. Now, if I didn't have the forward vanguard and the Cantus Priest was on the offensive side and he's on the enemy cover, he still gains 3 and 3. He does damage, direct damage to the opponent, which would normally be 2 damage, so 2 cards. But because he's on the offensive side or on the enemy cover side, it would be an additional 1 card, so 3 in total that would take direct damage. So let's just go back. But I have 2. So let's just say I've got the Cantus Priest. I'm attacking. He's got 3 attack, 3 defense. I choose both my forward vanguards to block that attack. And what happens now is the Cantus Priest, his attack value is aimed at each defending unit, but the defending units combine their attack value to attack the Cantus Priest. So in this situation, the Cantus Priest would attack the forward vanguard, killing it, would attack this forward vanguard, killing it, but their collective firepower of 4 would kill the Cantus Priest at 3 defense. So I'm going to just do that for the sake of demonstration. I block it. These 2 get killed. Cantus Priest gets killed. Done. Hopefully I explained the different variations of that scenario. And again, that comes down to the choice of the defender. Do you want to just allow it? Do you just want to block once, not sacrifice a second card? Maybe that's not a good idea. Or maybe you want to get rid of that guy behind cover because you're hoping that the next play you've got something set up. So at this stage, that ends the combat phase, and the Locust would go into their second deployment, which I cannot do. So they can either discard a card or draw a card. I choose to draw a card. Okay, and I've got another Cantus Priest. Here we go. So I'm going to go into the Cog stage, and we've got a King Raven, which is great because I can play it with 3. So I'm going to play the King Raven into my reserve, and this is where I have the option to go in the combat phase, and I can move. This is what I find strange, is moving a vehicle into cover. I didn't see anything specifically saying that only troops can move into cover. I think any unit can move into cover, including vehicles. So thematically, I feel this is where it kind of breaks theme. But somebody comment. Somebody let me know. Maybe I've got the rules wrong, and you can't do that. But if I wanted to do it, I can move this attacking into cover to kill that Wretch Pack and then hold on to that. But quite honestly, I like the King Raven to gain the benefit of being behind this cover here, the high wall. So we're going to move it into here. Now it's got 5 and 5. That was my combat phase. And now I go into my second deploy phase, in which case I'm going to deploy my fresh recruit because I can. So he's going to go into the reserve line. Ends my turn. Locusts, they're up first. Or up next, I'm going to play the Cantus Priest. Cantus Priest is he's not going to go in and go ahead against the King Raven. I don't think that's a good idea. I think I will leave him there. So it says, on deploy, you may move a unit in your discard pile with an attack value of 2 or less into the reserve. Now, I've got another Cantus Priest that matches that requirement. I'm going to move it in there. Now, I do not think I can initiate this deploy on this card a second time. If I can, someone correct me, but I'm moving it, not deploying it. So I'm going to move it in, and it's now into the reserve. And right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this, it's now into the combat phase. I'm going to move the Cantus Priest into cover. I'm going to leave this Cantus Priest in the reserve. Okay, he's going to be my blocker. And with the Wretch Pack, I'm going to declare an attack, a direct attack against my opponent. Cog player as a defender has an option of playing any reaction cards. I don't have one. Locust then has an option of playing any reaction cards to augment the stats of the unit. He doesn't. So then I choose to block with my fresh recruit. So the Wretch Pack of 1 attack value of 1, defense value of 1 against my fresh recruit of 2 and 2. The wretch pack gets killed, and my fresh recruit, because he's damaged but not killed, he gets tapped. He will untap at the beginning of the round of the cog player's turn, but he cannot, if there was another attack coming from the locust cover, he would not be able to block that because he's done his job once already. So he's going to stay here, tapped, and that's it. At this stage, we're done with the locust combat phase, which goes into their second deployment. I cannot do it, so I'm going to draw a card. Okay, and that's it. Now we move into the cog turn. I've got the 1 card here. I'm going to draw a card, and I'm also going to refresh my fresh recruit. And let's see here. We are going to just hold on to that. We're going to go straight into combat. Now, I could go ahead and try to take on that Cantus Priest, but I'm not going to. The King Raven is going to do an attack, a direct attack. And now this is the option for the Locust player to play a a reaction card, and I'm going to. Friendly unit gains +3. So now the Cantus Priest has +5. Is that enough? That would be enough. The cog player as the attacker has the opportunity to play something, but he can't. So we're going to exchange gunfire. The Cantus Priest is dead, but because he has enough attack to overcome the King Raven's 5 defense, the King Raven is dead as well. So these two get killed. And that's it. So with my fresh recruit, I could move him into cover, but I'm going to keep him here. So I'm going to keep him here. That's it. I can go into my second deploy phase, which I'm going to draw a card. And there we go. So now the Locust turn, he can choose to draw a card, which he's going to do. I'm going to draw a card. And that's it. I move into my combat phase. The Cantus Priest is going to do a direct attack. I'm going to use my fresh recruit to block. As the defender, I have the option to play a card, and I think I will. I'm going to go ahead and say hit the floor. Reduce the damage dealt to all friendly units in this combat to 0. So I'm going to do that one. And the Locust clearly has an option to play a reaction card. He's not going to. So we're going to exchange gunfire. He's not going to take any damage, but the Cantus Priest is dead. And the fresh recruit will stay in the reserve. So that ends the combat phase for the Locust, and now I'm going to discard a card. I'm going to discard this card from my hand because I want to play the Boomer card on my next deployment. That ends the Locust turn. Cog turn, we're going to go ahead, we're going to draw a card. And then we're going to move the fresh recruit into cover during my combat phase, and now I can play, or I can do another second deployment, which I don't think I'm going to. So I'm going to just draw a card. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, Locust turn. I'm going to deploy the Boomer, the first deployment phase. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attack into cover. So I'm moving in. He's attacking the fresh recruit. Does the fresh recruit have anything to play as a reaction? He does not. So the fresh recruit is dead, and the Boomer moves into cover. And combat phase, second deploy phase, I draw a card. I got the Grenadier. Okay. Now we move into the cog. The cog phase, we're going to go with, we're going to play the private. We're going to put him in the reserve. We're not going to attack the Boomer. We're going to move him into cover. End combat phase. Second deploy phase, I'm going to play Planted Grenade because I have 3 cards in my hand. Kill an enemy unit in cover. So I throw the frag, Boomer gets killed on that side. That ends my second deploy phase. We switch over to the Locust. I've got the Grenadier. Grenadier is going to get played into the reserve. And then it says on the deploy, you may discard a card. If you do, draw up to 2 cards. I don't have any more cards to do. I'm going to stay there because I'm not going to win against the private. And then I'm just going to draw a card for the second deployment phase. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so over to the cogs. The cog is going to play battle plans. I'm going to draw up to 3 cards. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So I'm going to have now my combat phase. The private is going to do direct attack against the opponent. The opponent says, I'm going to block with my Grenadier. He has the option as the defender to play any defense cards, which he does not, or any reaction cards. The private, he's got 2 and 3, so he'll clearly beat the Grenadier, and he'll still survive. And it says, while this unit is in cover, it gains +1 attack, so more than enough. So we could easily play, if we wanted to, Heroism to give him an additional 2 and 2, maybe if he was facing off against a Boomer, but we don't need to in this situation. We're going to block that direct attack. The Grenadier gets killed. And that ends the combat phase for the Cog. And now we can play a card, which would be Hardened Dom. This is my second deployment. I've got 4 cards in my hand. And he's got that keyword, offensive. Yeah, he's very offensive. At the start of your turn, claim a Cog tag. This belongs to another chapter, so you can ignore that. But let's just say it was something else. Offensive means that he's on the enemy side of cover on the offensive. That's when he would gain this bonus or whatever text here. So I'm going to play him into my reserve. So I've got into my reserve, and that ends my second deployment. Now we move into the Locust turn, and we're going to draw a card. And we're going to go into the combat phase. We're not going to do anything because we have nothing. And then on my second deployment phase, I'm going to play Ink Grenade, kill an enemy unit in the reserve or cover. So I'm going to play that one, and I decide to kill the private. I would go for Hardened Dom, but I think it's more beneficial for me to kill the private. And then that ends the Locust turn. I go back to the Cog. I get to play Armadillo because I have 3 cards in my hand. Deploy. You may move another friendly unit in the reserve to unoccupied cover or move a friendly unit in cover to the reserve. If you do, the enemy player is dealt 1 direct damage. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to deploy him. I'm going to move Hardened Dom into the high wall. And as a result, the player gets 1 direct damage, nothing to block it. And I'm going to choose to, and you have to decide beforehand, you have to choose whether or not you're going to draw the card or discard the card before you do it. And you don't get to choose. So it's not like you can draw it and say, no, I don't want it. So I'm going to go ahead and I think I will draw that card. I will draw that card. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so that was the end of the second deployment phase for the Cog. Now we go to the Locust player turn. And we're going to draw another card. And we're going to go through the combat phase. No combat phase to do because I have no one in my reserve. And I'm going to play the... I'm going to play the Wretch Pack. Deploy that into my reserve. That ends the Locust turn. Cog turn. I will draw a card. And that's it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say... I'm going to move the Armadillo into the low wall cover. And Hardened Dom, as he started in cover, I'm going to declare direct attack against my opponent. He wants to defend with the Wretch Pack. He has the option to play any reaction cards, which he doesn't have one. Attacker can have that choice too. We don't need to because we clearly have more firepower than necessary. So the Wretch Pack is killed. And that ends my combat phase. I move into second deployment, and I'm going to deploy the heavy infantry into the reserve. Okay, Locust turn. And right now, if you're looking at it in terms of comparing, we're still about equal. Amount of life in the Locust deck and the amount of life in the Cog deck. So I'm going to deploy the Bolter Drone because I can, and it has the ability, when on the offensive, when this unit deals direct damage, increase this damage by 1. When this unit attacks the enemy player directly, the enemy player can't declare any blocking units. So he's pretty interesting. I'm going to deploy him into my reserve, and then I'm going to, during my combat phase, I'm going to move him into cover on this side. And then as my second deployment phase, I'm going to put the Boomer out. Right there. Cog turn. So Cog turn says, okay, I need to draw a card. And that's not too bad. Yeah, let's see how this goes. Okay, so I'm going to declare a attack with Hardened Dom, a direct attack to my opponent. He's going to block with the Boomer. Dom has 5 and 5 because he gets the +1 and 1 from the high wall, and that means they kill each other. So Hardened Dom is killed. The Armadillo, he's going to attack declare a direct attack, and he's going to move into the offensive to do this attack, which gives me a +1. The Locust has nothing to do. They can't stop it. So now they choose. There are 3 cards because it's 3 damage. Under normal circumstances, if the Armadillo was here, it'd be 2 damage, but he's on the offensive. It gives him +1. So 3 cards coming out of the Locust draw deck. At this stage, the player must decide, the Locust player decides, do I want to draw all 3, just 1, or 2? You cannot draw them and then decide afterwards. So I'm going to choose to draw 2. So I draw 1, 2, and then the third one gets discarded. I could have drawn that one too, but I decided not to. Okay, so that's what happens. And then for my heavy infantry, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and attack into cover. I'm gonna attack into cover. I've got 3 and 3 against the bolter drones 2 and 2. I'm gonna take a look as the Locust defender. I'm gonna say I play this one. Requires any number of cards in my hand. I get a +2 and 2, and I may discard a card. I'm not going to. So that boosts him up to 2 and 2 plus 2 and 2, which is 4 and 4. So he's got more than enough to kill the heavy infantry, and he'll survive. But I'm going to go ahead as the attacker, play heroism, and I gain 2 and 2, and I can choose to draw a card, which I'm going to. I draw a card. And then that now gives him 5 and 5 as he's attacking into cover, kills the bolter drone, and moves into cover. And there we go. So now I'm on the cog second deployment phase, in which case I'm going to deploy my corporal. Because I have 3 cards, I deploy him. There we go. Now it's the Locust turn. Locust says I get to draw a card. And I can't do anything because I have nothing. And then I skip the combat phase, and I'm going to draw another card for my second deployment phase. Okay, goes back to the cog turn. Not looking good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a card. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my corporal into high wall. I'm going to declare attack with my armadillo, which is on the offensive. So another 3 cards. So as the Locust player, I can choose, and I choose to take all 3. So I'm going to draw 1, 2, and 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 cards in my hand. And then the heavy infantry, he's going to move into the offense, so the enemy cover, and he declares an attack for another 3. In this case, the Locust player says, no, I'm not going to do it, so I'm going to discard all 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, there we go. That ends the cog combat phase. So now I go into the cog second deployment, in which case I'm going to deploy the armadillo because I have 3. On deploy, you may move another friendly unit in the reserve to unoccupied cover, or move a friendly unit in cover to the reserve. If you do, the enemy player is dealt 1 direct damage. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move the heavy infantry back into the reserve. When I do that, he takes 1 direct damage, which he's going to discard. So now I've whittled down his health deck or his deck quite significantly in that round. So it's not looking good for the Locust. So now it's the Locust turn, and we're taking a look here. So I have 6 cards. I'm going to deploy. I'm going to deploy the Cyclops. While there are no other friendly units in the reserve or cover, this unit gains 2 and 2. So we're going to do that. Okay. And when we do that, we are going to go ahead and during the combat phase, we're going to attack the armadillo into cover. We're attacking into cover. Cog as the defender has the option to play something. He can't. So the Cyclops, is he going to do anything? Can he augment something? He could, but right now he gets 4 and 4 against the 3 and 3. There's no problem there. So the armadillo gets destroyed and the Cyclops moves into cover. And he still has +2 and 2 for his ability. We go into the second deployment phase for the Locust. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to play the spotter drone. On deploy, you may discard a card. If you do, you may deal 2 damage to an enemy unit in the reserve or in cover. If the discarded card was a sniper drone, kill the enemy unit instead. Do I have a sniper drone? Oh, it's too bad. So I'm going to deploy him, but I'm not going to use that deployability. So he's going to go into the reserve. That ends my turn for the Locust. And now we go to the Cog. I think we'll be able to finish this off. I choose to draw a card. We have Airstrike. Oh, man. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my Armadillo and attack into... No, I'm not going to do that. Do I want to do that? I don't want to do that. No. I'm going to move heavy infantry. Heavy infantry, I'm going to move it into cover. When this unit moves from the reserve into cover, the enemy player is dealt 1 direct damage. So I move into cover, I deal 1 direct damage. Do I want that one or not? I think 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I'm not going to take it, so I'm going to discard this one. So it's 1 direct damage. So that was his move. That was the combat phase. Corporal is going to do an attack. The attack is going to be blocked by the spotter drone. So they're going to exchange gunfire, but does the Locust have anything he wants to play? He does. He plays Frenzy. Any friendly unit gains +2 and 2. I may discard a card if I want to, and I'm not going to. So I do this one. He gets +2 and 2. Cog player has an option to play something. He does not have anything, so he's got 5 attack, 5 defense against 4 attack, 4 defense. The Corporal is dead, and the spotter drone is tapped because he blocked that and still survived. He took damage. So the only other thing is my Armadillo. If my Armadillo moves in here, this Cyclops no longer gets his ability because there's another friendly unit in the reserve, so he's 2 and 2, so we're going to do that. So Armadillo is going to move in for the attack. Cyclops, the Locust player, has an option to play something, and he's going to play this one. A friendly unit gains +1 for each friendly unit in the reserve or cover. So he's going to play this one, so it will get this Cyclops +2 because there's him and him. That's +2 attack. He'll still die, but he's taking the Armadillo out with him because the Cog player does not have anything to play. So the Armadillo is dead, the Cyclops, and this one is dead. That ends the Cog player's combat phase, and now we can play. We can go into the second deployment for the Cog, and we're going to discard this card, and that's it. So now it's Cog player's turn. He is going to unexhaust this one. I choose to play or draw. I'm going to play the Hunter. Goes into the reserve. Spotter drone is going to move in. Oh, sorry. On the deploy, you may choose an enemy unit in cover and move it to the reserve. The chosen unit is suppressed. We're not doing that. So we're going to move the spotter drone into cover, and we're going to move the Hunter. Actually, we're going to keep the Hunter there. No, we're going to move the Hunter in. We're going to move the Hunter into cover. The Hunter is going to go in cover. End of combat phase for the Locust. The second deployment phase for the Locust, I play the Boomer card because I can. There we go. The Boomer is in the reserve. Cog player's turn. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play Airstrike. I've got 2 cards. Kill an enemy unit in the reserve. So I'm going to kill the Boomer. Okay. Now I'm going to move into combat phase. Heavy infantry unit, I am going to declare an attack, a direct attack. I'm moving into offense, which gives me +1, which means now the Locust player has no one to defend. There's no one in the reserve to defend, no cards to play. So it's 3 cards. He can choose to take all in his hand or discard all or any combination. But there's only 3 cards left in the deck, so this is an immediate win. So the Cog player has won. He whittled down the health or the life deck of the Locust player and successfully destroyed the Locust. Now, if this was a regular campaign game, this particular scenario or chapter would be played 3 times, and it would be the best of 3. Best of 3, the outcome of that, you would move on to the next chapter and follow the appropriate condition based on the previous chapter's win-loss condition. So there you go. That is Gears of War, the card game. Now, as you can see, the actual turn structure is fairly quick, back and forth, back and forth. Once you get the flow of the game and the cards that you have. And I think when it comes to theme, I think the only thing that this really has going for it is the way you manage your cards in your hand and the cover and how to use the cover. Clearly, you want to control cover. In order for you to successfully attack your opponent and whittle down their health, you need to be in cover. There really is very few ways. There's only a handful of cards or abilities that would inflict direct damage. So when it comes to that, I feel that that theme. I feel it's an interesting mechanic and a way to manage and strategize how you play your cards, and is it the right time to draw a card? Is it the right time to discard a card? If do I allow them to attack me and say like for direct damage so that I can draw some cards, and that help me plan my next deployment. I think those kind of restrictions makes this very strategic in that sense. But it makes it very difficult because again, it all just like any other card game, it all comes down to what you draw. I did not have a chance to deploy this because I need 8 cards in my hand. I mean, I could have saved up at the end of the turn, draw a card, draw a card at the beginning. Don't play any cards. Well, I have to, or draw more cards, right? So, or take some damage in order to meet that 8. So, but once it's out there, yeah, it's pretty powerful, 5 and 5, and with the right um, reaction cards to supplement that, up to 7 and 7. That's not bad. So hopefully this playthrough captured the whole essence of the game. I think there are a handful of keywords that I didn't come across, like tough. I think there was another one, tactics. Tactics, the keyword tactics just means that it's a command card that you can actually play, a command tactic card. I think the terminology in the rule book is a little, I think there's too many, oh, that sounds a lot like this and that sounds a lot like that. Um, and I think, again, my only real gripe is the rule book. I get what they're doing. I get they're introducing you piece by piece, and that's perfectly fine. Just have one final 2-pager of explaining everything so that if I were to ever come back in 6 months to teach someone, I don't have to read the first 7 chapters to get all the information I need to play the game. I should be able to reference it all in one. I really think that was just a misstep. But they're making it thematic because that's how the video game plays out. It lets you a little bit of information as you're going along so that you can master it, and then you've got the full set of skills ready to take on the Brumac. And I think there is a Brumac in this game. I haven't come to him yet. So it is campaign based, so it does help to play it through the campaign. I think I kind of wish that these scenario cards had a bit more flavor text to it. I mean, look at all that space that's missing. You know, E-hole, get a frag in there. Move your ass, Sergeant Marcus Phoenix. Come on. I kind of wish that they had a scenario snippet. You could easily fit a couple paragraphs in here, maybe 2 paragraphs, just to sort of lay the land, lay the landscape, get immersed in why are you fighting as the cog or the locust. And it would be great to flip back and forth because the locust has their own story in the game, in the video game series. It was very interesting. No spoilers, but I'm sure you already know. But it was very interesting in terms of how they came to be, what their story is, and how they relate to the cogs. And it would be nice to flesh that out a bit more in the back of these scenario cards. I mean, here the setup is fine, and they could probably even squeeze in something else. But this first half of the scenario, come on, just add some more flavor text, make it a little bit more immersive. I think that would have been a nice touch, just to again keep it in theme with the rest of the game. Aside from that, component quality, the card quality is pretty good. It's got a slight linen finish. Most of the artwork, I feel, and it's been a while, but I don't think they're necessarily screenshots from the actual game, but it's still good. I still like the artwork and the design of it. I think there's some that's unique and not necessarily from the game. I think it spans through. I don't know if it covers like if it's just Gears of War 1 to 3 or if it covers 4 and 5. I don't know because I haven't gotten that far, but I'm most of the chapters I've gone through, it's very familiar with what I've seen. You know, General Ram. I think that Evil Queen is in this one too. The Brumac, the Spider, or whatever it's called. So all that is there as well. So if you're a fan of the game, all this will resonate with you. It'll be very familiar. And I kind of wish, like, you know, with your command unit, I kind of wish you could feel like Marcus, but you don't really feel like Marcus or Dom. There's nothing unique there. I don't know if what's his name, Coltrane, and who's the handyman guy? I forgot his name already. Blair? No, I forgot. Whether or not they're in this as well, but it'd be nice if they had some context to make it more thematic. But aside from that, it's just all cards. There's nothing else. No tokens to keep track of. Your health is your deck. You're whittling it down, and you're trying to strategically think about what you're doing. And I think one of the things that's nice about this is you really are trying to plan several steps ahead because you're restricted by the cards in your hand and what cards you can play because of the number of cards in your hand. So there you go. Gears of War, the card game. I hope you enjoyed that. And hopefully, if you've been on the fence, maybe this either made you say, "Hey, I want to get it," or "No, I'm going to stay away from it." And if you do have the game, maybe you feel the same way. Maybe you feel the same way about the rulebook and just overall gameplay. Or maybe I made a mistake, which is fine too. Let me know in the comments. But if not, hopefully, if there was something that I came across that helped flesh out the rulebook and understanding, I'm happy that that you got that out of this video as well too. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, I'll stay bored.